My daughter said I was embarrassing. Until her friends met me. Hi everyone! Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together, we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. The first time Lily told me I was embarrassing, she was 13 and I had just waved at her from across the grocery store parking lot. Not a dramatic, arms-flailing kind of wave, just a regular mom wave, the kind I'd been giving her since she was old enough to recognize me from a distance. But apparently, 13 was the age when maternal recognition became a source of public humiliation. "Mom!" she hissed when I reached her near the shopping carts, her face flushed with mortification. "Why did you have to wave like that? What if someone from school saw you?" "Like what?" I asked, genuinely confused. "I was just saying hi." "You were being loud and obvious. Just don't do that anymore, okay?" I should have recognized it as the beginning of the end of the easy relationship we'd had when she was little, when she thought I hung the moon and asked me to braid her hair and wanted to be just like me when she grew up. But I was still naive enough to think it was a phase, something we'd laugh about later when she was older and had children of her own. I was wrong. It wasn't a phase. It was the new normal. By the time Lily turned 15, I had become a walking embarrassment in her eyes. My clothes were wrong too bohemian, too colorful, trying too hard to be young. My job was weird and hard to explain to her friends' parents. My laugh was too loud. My questions were too probing. My very existence in public spaces, where her peers might see me, was apparently a source of deep personal shame. "Just try to be normal," she'd say before school events, her voice tight with anxiety. "Don't tell stories about your work. Don't mention the weird stuff you read. Don't laugh at your own jokes. Just be quiet and blend in." The worst part wasn't the criticism itself. Teenagers are supposed to rebel against their parents. I knew that. The worst part was how it made me second-guess everything about myself. I'd catch myself in the mirror and wonder if my vintage band t-shirt really did look ridiculous on a 42-year-old woman. I'd pause before speaking at parent-teacher conferences, filtering my words through Lily's imaginary judgment. I'd started making myself smaller, duller, more forgettable. The irony was that I'd spent most of my adult life doing exactly the opposite. As a forensic anthropologist, I worked with law enforcement agencies to identify human remains, to piece together stories from fragments of bone and trace evidence. It wasn't exactly dinner party conversation, but it was fascinating work that combined my love of science with my desire to help families find closure. I'd published papers, spoken at conferences, consulted on cases that made national news. At home, I collected vintage vinyl records, could play guitar well enough to occasionally sit in with local bands, and made a mean Thai curry from scratch. I read voraciously, everything from academic journals to science fiction novels to poetry collections. I had opinions about art and music and politics, and I wasn't afraid to share them. But none of that mattered to Lily. To her, I was just the mom who dressed weird and did creepy stuff with dead people, and couldn't seem to understand that parents were supposed to fade into the background, not stand out. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in October. I'd been working late on a particularly challenging case, a set of remains found in a state park that had been tentatively identified but needed confirmation through dental records. I'd finally made the match that afternoon, which meant another family could have closure. Another missing person case could be officially closed. I was feeling good about my work, energized in the way that comes from solving a difficult puzzle. Lily was in the kitchen when I got home, making herself a sandwich with the careful precision of a teenager who's been told to be self-sufficient. "Good day at work?" she asked without looking up, which had become her standard greeting, polite but distant. "Actually, yes," I said, dropping my bag by the door and heading to the refrigerator. Remember that case I mentioned? The remains from Riverside Park? We got confirmation today. The family finally has answers. Lily's face scrunched up in that expression I'd come to dread. Mom, that's so gross. Why do you have to talk about that stuff? Because it's my job. And it matters. This family has been looking for their son for 3 years. It's just weird. Megan's mom is a teacher, and Sophie's mom works at the bank. They have normal jobs that don't involve dead bodies. There it was again, the word that had become her weapon of choice. Normal. As if there were some universal standard of acceptability that I consistently failed to meet. Well, I said, trying to keep my voice light, someone has to do the weird jobs. Otherwise, families would never know what happened to their loved ones. I guess. Just, maybe don't bring it up at the parent-teacher conference next week? Mr. Peterson always asks parents about their work, and last time you started explaining about bone analysis, and he looked really uncomfortable. I stared at her, this beautiful, sharp, impossible girl, who had somehow decided that my life's work was something to be ashamed of. Lily, I said carefully, what exactly do you want me to say when people ask what I do for a living? Should I lie? Just say you work in science or something. You don't have to get specific. That night, I called my sister Rebecca, who lived across the country with her own teenage daughter. She's embarrassed by me, I told her, curled up on my couch with a glass of wine and my cat purring in my lap. Everything about me, my work, my clothes, the way I laugh. I'm like her personal source of social anxiety. Rebecca laughed, not unkindly. Welcome to parenting a teenager. Emma went through the same phase. She used to make me drop her off 2 blocks from school so her friends wouldn't see my car. Your car is a perfectly nice Honda. That's what I said, but apparently it wasn't the right kind of Honda, or something. The point is, it passes. They come back around. What if Lily doesn't? What if she's genuinely ashamed of who I am as a person? Then she's an idiot, and she'll figure it out eventually. You're one of the most interesting people I know, Sarah. You're smart and funny, and you do work that actually matters. If Lily can't see that, it's because she's too busy worrying about what other people think to notice how cool her mom actually is. I appreciated Rebecca's confidence, but it didn't ease the ache in my chest. I wanted my daughter to be proud of me, not embarrassed by me. I wanted her to see me as someone worth knowing, not someone to be hidden from her friends. The parent-teacher conference the following week was everything Lily had feared it would be. Mr. Peterson, her English teacher, did indeed ask about my work, and despite my daughter's silent pleading from the chair beside me, I found myself explaining what I did for a living. Forensic anthropology, Mr. Peterson repeated, his eyebrows rising. That sounds fascinating, like something from a TV show. It's less glamorous in real life, I said, aware of Lily shrinking in her seat. Mostly it's careful measurement and analysis, lots of paperwork, hours in the lab. But yes, it can be interesting. Mom solves crimes, Lily mumbled, and I could tell she was trying to make it sound impressive despite her discomfort. Not exactly, I corrected gently. I help identify remains so families can have closure. I don't solve the crimes themselves. That's up to the police detectives. After the conference, Lily was quiet on the drive home. Finally, she spoke. Mr. Peterson seemed really interested in your job. He was being polite. Maybe, or maybe he actually thought it was cool. She paused. Some of my friends think it's cool too, when I told them you worked with bones and stuff. This was news to me. You told your friends about my work? Just a few. Sophie asked what you did after career day, when her mom talked about banking, and I said you were like a detective but for old cases. She said it sounded awesome. I felt something loosen in my chest. Really? Yeah. She asked if you'd ever worked on any famous cases. Have I? Worked on famous cases? Lily shrugged, but I could see she was curious despite herself. I don't know. Have you? The truth was, I had. I'd worked on several cases that had received media attention, including one that had been featured in a documentary about cold cases. But I'd never talked about it much at home because I didn't want to sensationalize the work or make it about fame rather than justice for families. Now I wondered if my discretion had been a mistake. "A few," I said, "but the fame isn't the point. Every case matters, whether it makes the news or not." Lily nodded thoughtfully, and for the rest of the drive home, she asked questions about my work. Real questions, not the dismissive ones she usually asked. What was the most challenging case I'd worked on? How long did it typically take to make an identification? Had I ever been wrong? It was the longest conversation we'd had about my career in years, and it felt like progress. But the real turning point came 3 weeks later, when Lily's friend group decided to hang out at our house for the first time in months. Usually, she preferred to go to other people's homes, anywhere but the house where her embarrassing mother might make an appearance. But Sophie's house was being painted, Megan's little brother was sick, and Jessica's parents were hosting some kind of work event. Our house was the only option. "Just try to stay upstairs, okay?" Lily had asked that morning, pacing around the kitchen with nervous energy. "They'll probably just hang out in the basement and watch movies. You won't even know they're here." "I do live here," I pointed out mildly. "I know, please don't be weird, okay?" I was working in my home office when the girls arrived that afternoon, 4 15-year-olds with backpacks and energy drinks, and the kind of easy confidence I remembered from my own teenage years. I heard them tromp through the kitchen, raid the refrigerator, and disappear downstairs to the basement family room. I stayed upstairs as promised, working on a report that was due the next morning. But around dinner time, I started hearing music from the basement, not the usual pop songs Lily favored, but something with more complexity. Guitar work that sounded like classic rock. Curious to spite myself, I went downstairs to offer the girls some snacks. They were sprawled across the couch and floor, but instead of watching a movie, they were listening to music and talking. The song that had caught my attention was Stairway to Heaven, playing from someone's phone. "Oh my God, I love this song," Sophie was saying. "My dad is always playing old music like this, but this is actually good." "It's Led Zeppelin," I said from the bottom of the stairs, and all 4 girls turned to look at me. Lily's face immediately flushed with anxiety. "Mom," she said quickly, "we're fine. We don't need anything." But Jessica, a girl I'd only met a few times, was studying me with interest. "You know Led Zeppelin?" "I know most classic rock," I said. "It was the soundtrack of my youth." "Cool. Do you know any other songs like this one?" I could see Lily shooting daggers at me with her eyes, silently begging me not to embarrass her. But the other girls seemed genuinely interested, so I took a chance. "Tons. What do you like about this one? The guitar work? The storytelling?" "Both," Sophie said. "It's like epic. Like it's telling a whole story." Before I could stop myself, I was recommending other songs, Bohemian Rhapsody, for its operatic storytelling, Hotel California, for its mysterious narrative, Kashmir, for its Eastern influences. The girls were nodding along, taking notes on their phones, asking follow-up questions. "Have you been to concerts for any of these bands?" Megan asked. "Some of them? I saw the Eagles a few years ago, and they were incredible. I've seen quite a few tribute bands, too." "That's so cool," Jessica said. "My parents only listen to, smooth jazz and NPR." Lily was watching this exchange with a mixture of confusion and wariness, as if she wasn't sure whether to be mortified or intrigued by her friend's interest in my musical opinions. "Mrs. Chen," Sophie said suddenly, "Lily mentioned you have a really cool job. Something with solving mysteries?" "Mom, you don't have to," Lily started, but Jessica interrupted. "Wait, what do you do?" I looked at Lily, trying to gauge whether she wanted me to deflect or engage. She gave me a tiny nod, and I decided to take the plunge. "I'm a forensic anthropologist," I said. "I help identify human remains for law enforcement agencies." The reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. "That's amazing! Like on TV? Do you solve murders?" Have you worked on famous cases? I found myself sitting down on the bottom step, answering their rapid-fire questions. Yes, it was somewhat like TV, but with more paperwork and less dramatic music. No, I didn't solve murders exactly, but I helped provide evidence that could lead to solutions. And yes, I'd worked on a few cases that had received media attention. Tell them about the documentary, Lily said suddenly, and I looked at her in surprise. What documentary? The one about cold cases. You were in it, remember? You identified that woman who'd been missing for like 20 years. I'd forgotten that Lily had even watched the documentary when it aired. She'd seemed uninterested at the time, scrolling through her phone while it played in the background. Oh, that one. It was a challenging case because the remains were incomplete and the missing person report was from 1987. We had to use dental records and some unusual markers on the bones to make the identification. How do you identify someone from bones? Sophie asked, leaning forward with genuine fascination. I found myself explaining the basics of my work. How bones can tell us about age, sex, ancestry, height, and sometimes cause of death. How we look for signs of old injuries or diseases that might match medical records. How we work with odontologists to compare dental records. That's the coolest job ever, Megan declared. I thought being a veterinarian would be cool, but this is like being a detective and a scientist and a historian all at once. It really is, I agreed. Every case is different, and you never know what story the bones are going to tell you. Have you ever been scared? Jessica asked. Like, working with dead people and stuff? Not scared exactly. Sometimes sad, especially when it's a young person or when you know the family has been waiting years for answers. But mostly I feel honored to help. These people deserve to have their stories told, even if it's just through their bones. The girls peppered me with more questions for the next half hour. They wanted to know about my education, my strangest cases, what TV shows got right and wrong about forensic work. I found myself talking about things I rarely discussed outside of professional settings. The satisfaction of solving a puzzle. The responsibility of speaking for people who could no longer speak for themselves. The way science could provide comfort to grieving families. Lily barely said a word during the entire conversation, but I could see her watching me with new eyes, as if she were seeing me clearly for the first time. When the girls finally shifted their attention back to music and movies, I retreated upstairs to give them their space, but the damage, or rather, the healing, had already been done. Later that evening, after Sophie's mom had picked up the group, Lily found me in the kitchen, making tea. So, she said, hopping up to sit on the counter beside me, my friends think you're pretty cool. Do they? Sophie wants to know if you'd talk to her AP biology class about forensic science, and Jessica asked if she could job shadow you sometime. I smiled, pouring hot water over my chamomile tea bag. What did you tell them? I said I'd ask you. She paused, swinging her legs like she used to do when she was little. I didn't know you were in a documentary. You watched it when it aired. You were on your phone most of the time. I was listening, though. I didn't want to seem too interested, I guess. Why not? Lily was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Because if I thought your job was cool, then I'd have to admit that maybe you weren't as embarrassing as I wanted you to be. And if you weren't embarrassing, then I'd have to figure out some other reason why I felt so awkward all the time. The honesty in her voice made my chest tight. Oh, sweetheart. I know it's stupid. It's just... When you're 15, everything feels like it matters so much. Like if your mom is weird, then maybe you're weird too, and then maybe nobody will like you. And now? Now I think maybe weird is better than boring. She grinned at me, and for a moment she looked exactly like she had at 7 years old, all gap-toothed enthusiasm and unguarded affection. Plus, Sophie said she wishes her mom was half as interesting as mine. Over the following weeks, I noticed a shift in how Lily talked about me, both to my face and to her friends. Instead of trying to make me invisible, she started including me in conversations. When Jessica did come to job shadow me for a day, Lily insisted on driving her to my office and introducing her to my colleagues. When Sophie's biology teacher took me up on the offer to speak to their class, Lily sat in the front row and asked thoughtful questions that showed she'd been paying attention to my work all along. It wasn't a complete transformation. Lily was still a teenager, and I was still her mother, which meant we still had our moments of mutual exasperation. She still thought some of my clothes were a choice, and I still thought her music was sometimes too loud. But the fundamental dynamic had shifted. Instead of seeing me as a source of embarrassment, she began to see me as a person worth knowing. The change became most apparent at her school's college night in November. Parents were invited to set up information tables about their careers, and for the first time in years, Lily actively encouraged me to participate. "You should definitely do it," she said when I mentioned the invitation. "Half these kids don't even know what forensic anthropology is. They think CSI is real life." "Are you sure? You won't be mortified if I start talking about bone analysis in front of your classmates?" "Mom," she said, rolling her eyes with affection rather than exasperation. "You literally help solve mysteries for a living. That's not embarrassing. That's badass." The college night was more successful than I'd expected. My table drew steady crowds of curious students asking about education requirements, job prospects, and the difference between forensic anthropology and forensic pathology. Several teachers stopped by to chat about incorporating forensic science into their curriculum. Parents approached me with questions about crime shows and true crime podcasts. But the best moment came when I overheard Lily talking to a group of underclassmen who'd been hovering near my table. "That's my mom," she was saying, and her voice was filled with unmistakable pride. "She identifies murder victims and helps families get closure. She was in a documentary and everything. She's basically the coolest person I know." Standing there in the crowded gymnasium, surrounded by poster boards about careers in accounting and real estate and middle management, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. My daughter's unqualified admiration. Not despite who I was, but because of it. The drive home was quiet but comfortable, filled with the easy silence of people who understand each other. "Thank you," I said as we pulled into our driveway. "For what?" "For letting me be myself tonight. For being proud of me." Lily unbuckled her seatbelt and turned to face me in the dim light of the car. "Mom, I'm sorry I spent so much time trying to make you into someone else, someone smaller and more boring. You were trying to figure out who you were. That's normal." "Maybe. But I think I was also scared that if you were too interesting, too accomplished, too much yourself, then I'd never be able to measure up." She paused. "I wanted you to be embarrassing because it was easier than trying to be as cool as you actually are." We sat in the car for a few more minutes, talking about her college plans and my upcoming cases and the band that was playing at the coffee shop downtown next weekend. Just a mother and daughter, comfortable in each other's company, no longer ashamed of who they were or who they came from. 3 months later, Lily wrote her college application essay about me. She didn't tell me about it until after she'd submitted her applications, but when she finally showed me the draft, I cried reading it. She wrote about growing up with a mother who talked to dead people for a living, who wore vintage band t-shirts to parent-teacher conferences, who could play guitar and make curry, and identify human remains with equal skill. She wrote about being embarrassed by my uniqueness and then learning to treasure it. She wrote about understanding, finally, that having a mother who stood out from the crowd was a gift, not a burden. "The most important thing my mother taught me," the essay concluded, "is that being normal is overrated, but being authentic is everything." She never apologized for who she was, even when I wished she would. And now I understand why. She was showing me how to be proud of myself, especially when I don't fit into anyone else's idea of what I should be. My daughter had said I was embarrassing until her friends met me, but the truth was more complicated than that. I had been embarrassing to her, Not because there was anything wrong with me, but because she hadn't yet learned that being different was something to celebrate rather than hide. Now, at 17, Lily introduces me to new people with obvious pride. She tells them about my work, my hobbies, my opinions on everything from music to forensic science to the best Thai restaurants in town. She's learned to see me not as an extension of herself, but as a separate person worthy of respect and admiration. And I've learned something too, that sometimes the greatest gift we can give our children is the example of living authentically, even when they wish we wouldn't. Even when they beg us to be normal, to blend in, to make ourselves smaller so they can feel safer. Because eventually, if we're patient and consistent and true to ourselves, they learn that authentic is better than normal. They learn that interesting is better than invisible. They learn that having a mother who refuses to apologize for who she is teaches them not to apologize for who they are either. The girl who once cringed when I waved at her across a parking lot now brings her friends home specifically to meet me. The daughter who begged me to be quiet at school events now asks me to speak at career days. The teenager who saw my job as something gross and weird now describes it to others as solving mysteries and helping families find peace. She was embarrassed by me until her friends met me. But more than that, she was afraid of me until she learned to be proud of herself. And that, I think, was always the real journey we were taking together. Not toward her accepting me, but toward both of us accepting that being extraordinary is nothing to apologize for.